Good evening and welcome. My name is Simon Gutierrez. I'm on the communications team with Pacific Power, and I just want to welcome you to our customer wildfire mitigation forum tonight. I know there's still a couple people in line getting some food, but kind of got to get going, so feel free to continue eating as we talk. We're here tonight to talk about our wildfire mitigation efforts. That's a fancy way of saying what we do to protect the communities we serve from the risk of a wildfire ignition and the risk of the wildfire itself. Wildfire mitigation is one of the company's top priorities. We've invested $500 million over the last 5 years in wildfire mitigation, and we're committed to investing about $2 billion going forward over the next 5 years. That's across our 6-state service area, so not just here in Oregon, but a healthy investment here in Oregon as well. What we're doing today is we're going to have a presentation similar to like a PowerPoint presentation, where we're going to give a high-level overview of some of the efforts that we're doing on the ground to keep the communities we serve safe. We'll kind of walk you through the different aspects of wildfire mitigation and the different operational techniques that we use along those lines. We'll have a couple videos interspersed in there, just kind of, again, a high-level overview of some of those efforts. And at the end of the presentation, we'll have a Q&A session where we'll ask you to raise your hands, and if you have a question, we'll do our very best to answer it. We may not have an answer today. In that case, we'll try to get your information after the meeting and get back to you with an email or a phone call or something like that. To start things off, I just want to introduce our folks that we have here. You see their pictures up here, and they're also here next to me. Starting here to my left, we have Megan Buckner. She's our this is a complicated title. I get it wrong every time. Wildfire Mitigation Program Delivery Manager. Did I get that right? Okay, I got it right. Chester Lampkin is one of our meteorologists. We have a team of 5, soon to be 6, I believe, meteorologists that monitor weather and fire conditions around the clock. And then Nora Yatsov is our Director of Emergency Management, and she'll talk to you a little bit about what you can expect in the event of a power outage, and also what you can do to prepare your home and the area around your home and protect it against wildfire, and some of the things that we do to help our customers in the event of an outage. We do have some rebate programs for generators and things like that that folks may qualify for. Before we get to that, though, we're going to play a little video. So let's take a look.
We are living in a world where there is more extreme weather, and wildfire risk continues to escalate. Here at PacifiCorp, we are making the investments necessary to protect the public and to protect the infrastructure and to protect the people of this company as well.
While the wildfire risk has been increasing here in the West, the investments that PacifiCorp has made has risen right along with it. To date, we've already spent over $500 million in wildfire mitigation, and the current forecast for deploying the system hardening that's involved in the wildfire mitigation plan reaches into the billions over the next 8-10 years. It becomes important to understand, well, where do we prioritize those investments? And so we want to make sure we're targeting that large investment where it's going to make the most impact, where it's going to reduce that fire risk the most.
We have an expansive weather station network here at PacifiCorp. By the end of 2023, in Pacific Power, we had nearly 300 weather stations, and in Rocky Mountain Power, we had nearly 200 weather stations. They're there because we're collecting important meteorological data that we're going to feed into our local weather forecast models. Temperature, wind, moisture levels, wind gusts. These hundreds of weather stations give us better data so that we can make better decisions on how to mitigate fire risk and how to protect the system from extreme weather events.
So by establishing an internal meteorology team, they're able to run these risk models with our own weather station network to help identify that risk no matter where and no matter when across our entire service territory throughout the year.
We have amazing, really cutting-edge technology. We have a computer model that covers more than 1 million square miles. It forecasts weather for every single point across that entire region. We have access to 2 types of modeling. We have the short-term modeling and the long-term modeling.
With both that long-term and short-term view, we're able to identify where the fire risk is, and by identifying that, we can then decide what mitigations to deploy.
We've taken 30 years of historical data, and we use that to identify areas of potential risk so that we can mitigate as much as we can ahead of potential wildfires in the future.
By looking back at that data, we understand that when the conditions are at their driest and when the wind is at its windiest, that top 5%, when those two things come together, that's where 98% of the catastrophic fires have occurred. When those conditions are present, we want to, for safety reasons, de-energize the lines and let those conditions pass. And so we deploy that when we know that the conditions are escalating, but they're nowhere near that top 5%. And so we give ourselves a little bit of a safety buffer, say a 15% dryness, 15% windiness, to make sure that we're making a good balanced decision between the risk and the outages that are created through the mitigation steps of de-energizing.
I'm optimistic because I know that we are doing the work necessary to keep the public safe and to protect the infrastructure of the utility.
As that risk has increased, our response has increased as well to match it and do everything possible to reduce that risk of fire in the areas we serve.
All right, there's sort of an overview about wildfire mitigation on our end. Now we're going to go down a little more granular and give some more details about both our situational awareness and our operational practices, and then we'll get into public safety power shutoffs and things like that. We'll start off with Chester Lampkin.
Thank you, Simon. I like to time myself to make sure I don't talk too long. Because I will talk about this all day. Because I'm a nerd. I like this stuff. I'm a meteorologist. It's what I do. So let's talk about it, right? Let's talk about how meteorology fits in with what we're doing here, what the company's doing, how we support operations, and how we can run the system better so it's safe. We keep our linemen safe, keep you all safe, and how we can lower that risk of wildfire. So let me start off by saying, again, my name is Chester. Excuse me, sorry, I'm loud. I'm a meteorologist. I've been working for Pacific Power not that long, actually. I've only been with the company for just 10 months now. So I bring that up not because I'm, trying to say, oh, I don't know anything. I mean, I'm still learning a lot. There's so much to learn. But one is I just want to point out that I used to be you all. I was just a power customer. So this is all new to me, but now I'm seeing the other side of how things work. So I was just in your shoes not that long ago. I had no idea what the power companies were doing in order to mitigate that growing risk of wildfire. So this is one of the cool things about my job is, our top job is to keep the community safe, keep you all safe, keep our linemen safe, our patrolmen, anyone who's working out in the field. And so I'm proud of what the meteorology team does here at Pacific Power. One of the first utilities to invest in an in-house weather research and forecasting team. We have our own computer model that we run in-house. We have a staff of 5, soon to be 6, as Simon mentioned. And we work every single day of the year to make sure that we know what risks are coming to the system, what's coming to Pacific Power and the territories that we serve. And it all starts with situational awareness. How do we know what's coming and what the risk is for wildfire, right? We need to know what the weather conditions are, what the fuel moisture is, how the trees and the vegetation, how have they been behaving in response to weather conditions and fire conditions and climate as well. We analyze that data real time to predict wildfire conditions, and we take different actions on our system in order to reduce the risk of wildfire happening. So we make a weather forecast, and our operations team, they'll make decisions on how they want to operate the system to keep that risk lower. So again, situational awareness is about what's happening now, today, and of course, what's coming down the pipeline. We're going to talk about the short-term risk. We make a weather forecast that goes out a few days into the future. We also have a long-term risk that we are looking at as well. We'll talk more about that with our wildfire mitigation. Megan's going to talk a little bit more about that here in a few minutes. Let's talk about the daily risk forecast, right? So we make a weather forecast just like you see in a television weather report or on the app on your phone. We make a 5-day forecast in the weather department. But we're also watching what's happening right now. So what's happening now, today, everywhere that we provide power across the entire company. We're one of the biggest power companies here in the West. We serve much of Oregon, of course, as you all know. That's why you're here, but also parts of Washington and California. We're a team of 5, soon to be 6. 3 of us are based here in Oregon. The other 2, soon to be 3, will be based in Utah, serving our sister company, Rocky Mountain Power. But we work as a team. So we're not just Rocky Mountain Power and Pacific Power. We're all one team. We work together. We have daily meetings. We make weather forecasts for the other part of our company. We back them up. They back us up. Every day there's a meteorologist covering the duty in 3 states in one part of the territory here in Pacific Power, and then another meteorologist covering the other 3 states. And we're making weather forecasts that go out 5 days into the future. We're also watching what's happening right now. We're focused on the transmission and distribution. So the transmission is, those big, gigantic power lines that take power from usually a source where we generate our electricity, different type of power plant or solar or whatever, the hydro, whatever the generation source is, and then that transmits it over to the different places that we serve, right? And then it goes through what we call the distribution or the circuit that leads to your house or your apartment, wherever you may live. So that's what we are making our weather forecast for. In the winter, we're worried about winter storms and freezing temperatures. You all remember the ice storm we had this past winter. That was a big one for us, and we were forecasting for that several days in advance. In the spring, we really start turning our attention to wildfire. We're always looking at the wildfire risks. Wildfire is going to happen any time of the year, but as you all know, wildfire season is now. It's starting to ramp up. So this is what we are here to talk about, and that's where we are most concerned. That's actually probably the most important part of our job in meteorology, that wildfire risk. We're concerned about that high winds, those windy gusts, strong gusts, hot and dry weather. Those 3 elements are the main conditions that contribute to wildfire risk. So if we're your power company, we are watching the weather in your neighborhood. Wherever we provide power, we are watching the weather. So how are we doing that? Well, we've got the network of weather stations I mentioned in the video earlier. Our company is now up to 454. We have several hundred more coming online in the next several years. We're in the process of deciding where those go now. They'll go along our transmission lines, the big ones I was telling you about that carries the electricity between the different generation points and throughout our system, and along our distribution, the circuits that connect to your home. There's a map of Oregon you can see there. Those orange dots, they're kind of hard to see. They're really tiny, but that's where we have weather stations. So we have several in this area, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. And that's actually a weather station right there on the pole there. I don't know what weather station that one is specifically because we have so many, I wouldn't be able to tell you. But what's really cool is that when I've actually gone out in the field a couple times. I like to go out more, but I haven't been invited yet by the operations guys. I'm waiting on that. No, I'll go out at some point, but it was really cool when I get to see those weather stations out there, knowing that they're out there to help keep you all safe. So anyway, so we've got the weather stations, feeds us data every 10 minutes. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. But all those things, actually I'll go into it right now. All those things that go into what you see at a weather station, the normal stuff, the stuff you would hear on a TV report, temperature, humidity, winds, the gusts. But we also use the weather stations in order to measure the amount of moisture there is in the vegetation. We aren't just measuring the moisture in the vegetation that's alive. We're also looking at the vegetation that's dead. That dead fuel moisture. It's actually extremely important. You're probably wondering, well, why does that matter? I mean, if it's dead, it's dry, but that's not always the case. And in places like here, in Lincoln City specifically, the closer you are to the coast, you're likely to have dead vegetation on the forest floor that has a lot of moisture in it because you guys are in the marine layer most of the time. And that has a major impact on whether fires can start. A lot of the fires that start in our forested areas, they start on the ground in that duff or that vegetation that's laying on the forest floor. So when you have a very strong offshore wind, that's when we get concerned about Lincoln City. It's when we get concerned about our other coastal areas down to Coos Bay or up to Clatsop and Astoria, because those are the days where we're most likely to see wildfires start and spread. So we need to know the moisture levels of the live moisture, the trees, the grassy areas, but also the dead fuel moisture, the plants that have died and are decaying on our floors, or the floors of the forest. So here's that local map I wanted to show you guys. There is Lincoln City there on the very left side of your screen, and you can see those green dots there. Those are some of the weather stations we have in the area. You also tie in with weather stations from other organizations. We don't work in a silo, right? We work with other communities as well. We work with other utilities. For example, PGE is one of our neighboring utilities, so we work with them. We input their weather stations into our data as well. We work with, of course, the National Weather Service. We work with other NOAA agencies, National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration agencies, and NIFC as well, the National Interagency Fire Center. We've got daily phone calls with the fire weather forecasters starting in the summertime. In fact, they start next week for this part of the country. So we'll be on those phone calls every single day talking about fire. That's all we will talk about is fire and the weather that could lead to fire conditions. By the way, those weather stations that I'm showing you right here, you can find them on that website. I'm going to plug it a couple more times, pacificpowerweather.com. And if you just look for the Oregon coast under region, you can find the weather stations that are located in this area. And it'll show you not just our weather stations, but other weather stations, RAWS weather stations or National Weather Service weather stations, FAA weather stations as well. All right, so we partner with other folks. We have our own weather data. We have our own computer model. Let's talk about some of that computer modeling, the short-term risk modeling. We have a computer model that helps us with our situational awareness. That second element of the situational awareness is that short-term risk of fire. The conditions that lead to fire, so we use our in-house computer modeling. We also use a program called Wildfire Analyst Enterprise. So let's talk about the in-house model first. It's called a WRF. It's a weather research forecast model, or if you're kind of a Trekkie like me, you think of Worf from Star Trek. Next Generation was the best one, that's my opinion. Anyway, we're transitioning into this. I want to tell you more about this. We're transitioning to the second part here, right? That computer model, the WRF, we ran it backwards 30 years so we can get a benchmark on what the worst fire days were, the worst gusty days, the worst hot day. So we ran it backwards 30 years. Now we have these benchmarks. So now when we make our 5-day forecast using that model, we can say compared to the last 30 years, this is extreme or not that extreme, or this is nothing to talk about, nothing interesting. And we can use that to look forward as well. It's really cool stuff that we're able to do that in-house. So we've done that for the entire calendar year for, again, 30 years worth of data. And we used it to look forward. We also use that data to see where wildfires are most likely to ignite and potentially spread quickly. We actually feed that computer model into that other piece of software. I'm going to talk about that Wildfire Analyst. I'm going to show you that in a minute. So again, our computer model gives a forecast every single day, comparing it to 30 years worth of data, going back to the 1990s to the 2010s. Up to about 2021, actually, is when we ran the analysis, going up to 2021. And it helps us predict how extreme conditions will be, how they can impact the power lines. We actually have the ability to make predictions about the risk of a power outage happening on the system, the risk of wildfires igniting on our system, and how that fire may spread and behave. And that's extremely important, too, for what operations is doing. So let me show you an example of that. I got 3 minutes left to stay on time. This is a video. We can play it there. There it goes. This is our computer model. I have it displayed in a program called Google Earth, but this is our Pacific Power computer model, our WRF model, and this is from August 2023. You all may have heard of this. This is the last big fire in our service area. Was last year, in August of last year. It was in Northern California. It was the Smith River Complex. It was multiple fires. This is the wind, okay? So the wind wasn't a big deal, right? We weren't concerned about fires starting because of wind. Like, you know, some Joe Schmo lights a fire on accident and then there's a fire spreads because of the wind. We weren't worried about that. What we were worried about was this next element here. This is lightning density. Our computer actually does lightning density as well. And so this is our in-house computer model. This is Northern California, the very bottom of Oregon there. You can see Brookings, there on the coast, north of Crescent City, and then you can see Ashland, which is next to Medford, and then Klamath Falls, those areas there. This is all part of Pacific Power's territory. That was lightning that came through those days there in August, early August. The Smith River Complex, the biggest fire in California last year, was started by lightning. It was a lightning start. It was actually multiple fires that started because of a lightning event. We are able to predict that. So we knew coming into that lightning event, we knew that there was going to be fire starts. And then several days later is when those fires really start to get going. Once the fire did get going, well, it threatened our transmission lines. This is that purple line there. That's our transmission lines that go through parts of California. We can use Wildfire Enterprise Analyst, that modeling program I was mentioning earlier, that wildfire software, to predict wildfire behavior. Now, this assumes that there's nobody out there fighting the fire, and we all know CAL FIRE, they're the best. They were definitely out there doing some work, but we were still able to use this to give an approximate time of when the fire, that Smith River Complex, was going to go through our transmission lines. We were going to have to cut power to people in California because of this, and we actually did end up having to do that. We had to de-energize those lines. This is also from the Wildfire Enterprise Analyst. The reason why I want to show you this one, this is just another fire element. This one's called energy release component. You don't need to know the science behind it, but what you do need to know is that energy release component tells you what's the likelihood that if a fire starts, how much energy will it have to grow and possibly spread. And the orange shows the areas where fire was most likely to spread, and a lot of it was right along the coast around that time period. And again, that's when the Smith River Complex started. So again, this is data that we just pulled from our wildfire analysts. We were able to use this data to predict what was going to happen with that wildfire, or those ignition starts when we had that lightning threat. Okay, so the final thing I want to talk about, again, we talk about the weather awareness website, pacificpowerweather.com. There it is again. You can find our weather stations. You can see our data in real time. You can see the data that we use, including our WRF model, yourselves. You can see it for yourselves on this website. You just got to find a weather station. Doesn't matter what weather station. You can click on any weather station, and it'll give you that data. It'll give you a little graph that shows you what the WRF thinks the temperature is going to be, what the humidity is going to be, what the wind is going to be. We actually use this every single day when we make our weather forecast. So this is one of my bookmarks on my computer. This is just an example of some of the weather stations that we have. This was in Southwest Oregon, so this is more towards Grants Pass and down towards Toketee, it looks like. So actually, Illinois Valley, yeah, so that would be Grants Pass area there. But you can pull up Lincoln City, and you can see our weather stations there. What's really cool about this, see that yellow, how that yellow pops up? That shows you when the winds are in that 95th percentile, that unusually strong wind. And then it'll ping red when it's the most extreme. That 99th percentile, that's when we're most concerned about wildfires spreading, when we have 99th percentile winds. You can see that reddish area on that graph there. That graph actually shows you the model. That's the WRF model I was talking about earlier, and it's pointing to the wind, so that's the wind forecast. So this spot here, this is US 30, I don't forget how you say it, Rowena? It's out in the Columbia River Gorge. I've been to that spot. It's a beautiful spot. But in that place, if we had a 48 mile per hour wind, that would be a 99th percentile wind. And we're in a hot, dry, windy condition, we'd be really worried about that spot. So that's how we make our weather forecast. You just saw how it's all put together, and you can see temperatures and all sorts of things. So again, pacificpowerweather.com. I've gone slightly over my time, but I think you guys probably appreciate seeing some of this information. Free website, check it out. And I'm going to stop talking. I've done enough of that. And we're going to go from short-term risk, and we're going to talk more about how we are hardening the system, making it better, stronger. And Megan's going to talk all about that with our wildfire mitigation program. Thank you.
Thank you, Chester. So it's wonderful to be back here in Lincoln City speaking to you all about wildfire safety. The last time I was actually up here talking about wildfire safety, my 3-year-old got to see elk for the first time. It was phenomenal. The nature up here, the wildlife is just beautiful, and I'm so glad to be here with this community. So my name is Megan Buckner. I am the Director of Wildfire Mitigation Program Delivery yes, program delivery. So it's a long title and it seems complicated, but what I'm going to be speaking to you today is really quite simple. It's the programs or the tools in the toolbox that Pacific Power as a company has available to it to help mitigate wildfire risk. And today I'm going to be speaking from a relatively high level, programmatic level. However, we do have several of your local experts in the room, and we have a general foreman, a manager chat. If you guys could all stand up, the Pacific Power employees. These are going to be your local experts. We got a lot of experts in this room. So I encourage you all, if you have some local questions, to reach out to them. They really know the community very well. And so also today, I'll be speaking right from a programmatic level, so kind of high level, but also I do want to mention I'll also only be speaking about the utility programs. Wildfire, though, is a community problem. It's more than just what the utility is doing. So I encourage everybody in the community to also learn from what your emergency management groups are doing, as well as your fire departments. I see we do have one fire department. Do we have any other, can the emergency management partner stand up? Do we have any other like emergency management groups here, or not today? Not today? Okay. Well, I do encourage everyone to check out their websites and look at the sort of resources that are also available through other organizations in your community for wildfire safety. So speaking of the utility programs, generally speaking, there's two kind of groupings of programs that the utility is implementing. The first is what I call resiliency, grid hardening, making the system itself more resistant to things like contact by object or wire-to-wire contact that can cause faults or potential sparks, right? So that's your first grouping. The second grouping of tools in the toolbox or programs is going to be the operational practices or the field operations that can occur differently depending on what the situational awareness reports are saying. And so those are the general two groupings of programs. And I also do want to mention that the programs are recognized in a recent Stanford study as some of the top in the country. And so these programs are very robust. So talking a little bit more about the Lincoln City service area. So Pacific Power has what we call a fire high consequence area. It's this sort of risk assessment that identified areas where should a spark occur, it would have quite high consequence. So you can imagine things like a spark in the middle of the woods where there's no one to respond and it's dry and it spreads rather rapidly, right? That's what the fire high consequence area map identifies. And generally speaking, your grid hardening programs are targeted in these areas because they're your more expensive type of programs. However, there are a lot more programs that are system-wide, including in your local Lincoln City service area. First, talking about some of the system hardening programs that are targeted in the fire high consequence areas, we have covered conductor, right? So there's a line rebuild program that looks at identifying line for line rebuild and either covering it in covered conductor or undergrounding it. Covered conductor is literally that. It's replacing your bare conductor with a covered material. There's actually a great example on the top of the board over there, and I encourage everyone to go check it out. You can like feel it and see what it looks like when it's covered. As part of that program, there's some engineering that's done. As you can imagine, covered conductor is much heavier than your bare conductor. And so there may be other pieces of equipment that go along with the redesign, such as replacing your poles with more fire-resistant poles. So instead of wood, you'll see things like fiberglass or steel poles going in. Additionally, you might see aerial spacers to keep your wires from touching. And an alternative to covered conductor can be undergrounding that's applied on a project-by-project basis as well. So these are the type of system hardening things that are happening targeted in the fire high consequence areas for now. However, there are also system hardening to replace the older reclosers and relays with the newer, what I call the smart reclosers or relays. So if you're sitting at home and you feel your lights flicker, and then they flicker again, and then they flicker again, and then they just shut off, you were probably experiencing a recloser switching or operating very quickly. This piece of equipment operates, what we call instantaneously. Very quickly, it switches, and then it can de-energize the power line as well. And we have a video to explain some of the switching that I'm talking about a little bit more towards the end of the conversation. So that's what Pacific Power team is doing to address grid hardening and making the system more resistant to contact by object and those sort of things. Additionally, there are different operational practices that happen, such as the Vegetation Management Program. The Vegetation Management Program consists of air and ground surveillance, so these sort of inspections or patrols, where vegetation is then cleared and pruned to an appropriate clearance. In some of the fire high consequence areas, it's cleared further back, or where you have like your cycle buster vegetation, like your faster growing vegetation, it's cleared further back as well. Additionally, there's also a program where trees are identified for tree removal. So you can think of this as your identification of dead, dying, or diseased trees are proactively removed. So if an inspector comes along a line, a vegetation management inspector comes across a line and identifies a tree, and wow, that tree's not looking so great, it has the potential to fall on the line, should it be a really windy day, it will be identified for tree removal. Additionally, not pictured here, but I think it's worth mentioning, is the pole clearing program. And so what that does is, in the fire high consequence areas, it clears around a pole, the vegetation. So should a piece of equipment switch, operate, should a spark fall to the ground, there's no vegetation on the ground for it to fall onto. So these are the vegetation management programs for wildfire mitigation. There's also some asset management programs as well. Generally speaking, it is finding conditions quicker and fixing them faster. So your energy release risk conditions are identified and prioritized to be corrected first, and then come the other types of priorities. Additionally, I do want to mention that there is a transmission IR inspection program, so the infrared inspection program that identifies hot spots along transmission lines. So this happens all across the Oregon service territory, and identifying hotspots allows for you to find arcing and pieces of equipment that's running a little hot. So it's an early indication that something might be wrong, and we're able to identify those and correct those types of conditions much quicker. Next, I did want to mention there are some alternative field operation practices that can occur as well. So should situational awareness reports indicate, wow, it's a really windy, dry day, or your ignition risk there's quite a bit of ignition risk today. There are some ways that field operations can operate differently. First, there's water trucks available that can be taken out to a site. You can water down a site. Also, field personnel may be asked not to drive off-road. Vehicles can be a source of ignition when it's on vegetation, so that's another alternative. The last alternative available is deferral of work. So it's really dry, it's really windy, work can be deferred as well. So those are some of the field operation practices that are different. Now, lastly, the group of tools in the toolbox to wrap this all up is system operations. So it's how the Pacific Power team can operate the system differently to mitigate wildfire risk. And there's sort of a tiered approach to it depending on the risk that comes out in the situational awareness matrix, right? So it could be things like just operating or switching much quicker, differently. It could also be de-energization. And the next escalation is when, say, there's a wildfire identified and we are proactively de-energizing the line. Well, that was interesting. And so this great little video here is going to go through the different programs in a little more detail.
At Pacific Power, we're committed to providing the safe, reliable service you count on every day. During conditions such as gusting winds and hot, dry weather, and in areas near trees and other types of vegetation that could ignite, we may need to take certain steps to reduce the potential risk and impact of wildfires. While these safety measures may interrupt your service, they are essential to preventing catastrophic wildfire events. Let's look at 3 of the ways we help protect communities during times of heightened wildfire risk. The first is enhanced safety settings. During times when wildfire risk is elevated, we will adjust the sensitivity of some of our equipment. With these settings activated, our lines will de-energize quicker, within fractions of a second, if a line is contacted by a tree branch or other debris, reducing the risk of a fire ignition. Because of this, there's an increased potential for power to be disrupted and remain off until field crews can visually inspect the lines to determine if power can be safely restored. Next up is the public safety power shutoff. Hotter, drier, and windier weather conditions can create heightened wildfire risk, and we may implement a public safety power shutoff, or PSPS, temporarily shutting off power to specific targeted areas. A PSPS is done in partnership with local emergency management teams, using available communication options to notify customers that power may be turned off, and to keep affected communities informed throughout an enacted shutoff. Once we've determined that the fire risk has passed, we will turn the power back on and restore service. Finally, our wildfire encroachment strategy is another wildfire safety tool that may result in a disruption of your power. When an active wildfire moves close enough to threaten burning into the area of our lines or equipment, we will begin monitoring the fire closely to evaluate its potential spread and impacts to our systems. If the fire is moving too close to our assets, we will do an emergency de-energization of our power lines. This process helps us make the most effective decisions to avoid additional fire risk and protect first responders. Here at Pacific Power, we're dedicated to keeping our customers safe while delivering the power that our communities count on each and every day. And during times of extreme weather events, when wildfire risk is at its highest, our wildfire safety strategies will help protect our customers and the communities that we serve. To learn more, visit us at pacificpower.net/wildfire.
Okay, so a couple of things I wanted to mention about that video. As a power utility, we don't want to shut off the power. However, it is a tool that is in the toolbox to keep the community safe during, it's a wildfire safety component. Additionally, I did want to mention at the beginning of that video, they had the recloser settings story, and there was a little limb that fell on the line, and the team member was able to come over and just lift the limb off. Wasn't that nice? As you can imagine, sometimes it can be a little more than a little limb. So I would just ask that everyone, if you could please be patient. It might be a patrolman patrolling the line, and they might identify a whole tree down, and they need to get a chainsaw out there, and they need to take apart the whole tree. So please just bear with us while the power is getting turned on. So I did want to mention that. Lastly, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Nora, who's going to be speaking more to the public safety power shutoff. So these are some of the things that emergency management is doing, as well as some of the things you can do as well to be more prepared for wildfire safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you so much for the cookies. I so appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for coming here, wanting to hear about us talk about wildfire safety, what we're doing, what we're learning, how we're growing, and really caring about what impacts you and your community, and being interested in having this conversation with us tonight. You heard from Chester about our situational awareness and how we can see what's coming and be better prepared. Those tools have been developed in the last 3 years. These are new tools that we now are growing in experience, and we're learning how to use them better. And they're amazing intelligence for us, and I call it actionable intelligence because it tells us what we need to do. Then you heard from Megan talking about long-term hardening. And ultimately, our goal is to make sure our system is so resilient that it can withstand these extreme conditions. But until then, we have these operational practices that Megan talked about. And I'm going to talk about one of them in a little bit more detail, the public safety power shutoff. Some of you remember or were impacted in September of 2022 when we had the public safety power shutoff here. Those conditions were so extreme. They were in that top percentile that you saw on the graph in the first video where they had the light green, yellow, and then that little corner of red. Really, that's where we were in September of 2022. We've only done it once since we started doing the PSPS program in Oregon. Our goal is never to do it, of course, but in those events, learning from experience, that's one of the tools in the toolbox. So under what conditions do we do it? besides those extreme conditions. You heard a little bit from Chester talk about the vegetation moisture, the trees, the brush, the branches, everything on the floor. Once they get extremely dry and flammable, under those conditions, we consider that. Hot, dry temperatures, winds. Wind is the number one enemy of utility lines because it picks things up and puts them in the lines, and that's when, you know, we get really concerned. Also, the terrain, like if it's flat with grass and it's really windy, that fire can travel really fast. If it's steep with a lot of dense trees and vegetation, it can also go really fast and get really big really quickly. And then the potential impact to communities or to infrastructure. Those are the considerations we all take a look at. So we take Chester's information and we make those decisions based on that. For a public safety power shutoff, I'm going to walk through this timeline for you so you can get an idea of what to expect during those types of events. It's maybe a little bit daunting, but I'm going to walk through each step over here. So we typically get information from meteorology about 5 days in advance, and we take the first few days to really fine-tune what areas really are going to be in these extreme conditions. We don't want to do it all over the system. We just want to do it in areas where you've got a lot of vegetation, you've got steep, you've got, you know, those multiple factors to consider. Then 3 days in advance, 72 hours, we would contact our public safety partners, and we have them right here in the room. Thank you for coming tonight. Appreciate it. We start working with them. There's a couple things that we figure out first. First, our goal is to figure out if there's critical infrastructure, facilities that don't have backup generation that we're looking at temporarily shutting off. You know, a hospital, a care facility, nursing home, you know, any of those facilities that may require power, that may have vulnerable people in the facility or provide essential services to the community that can't have their power shut off. And we work towards trying to get a backup generation. And then next we look at, do we need to stand up a community resource center? So a community resource center, it's not a shelter where it's an overnight, but it's a long operation during the daytime, and it's a place for people to go when their power is out to get access to power to charge their devices, their medical devices, their phones, and so forth, get information on what's happening, get out of the heat, get some air conditioning. We have EMS services there, basic services there, snacks and water and hydration. So we set those up based on what makes sense for the community, but we don't necessarily know where that will be. So that's why we work with our local partners to determine if we need one and where that should be so it's accessible. Then at 48 hours or 2 days before we're anticipating the event, we start making contact with you, the customers, directly. And we do this directly. We do it by phone, text, and email based on the information that we have from you. So we encourage you to make sure your contact information is updated because that's our number one way of communicating with you. We make another notification 24 hours out and then another one 1 to 4 hours out. We do this, give you a few days to get ready. Of course, sometimes as great as meteorology team is that we have here, sometimes the weather doesn't materialize and we don't have to turn the power off. And we would let you know also, we'll send you a notification that we canceled it. But if we do have to turn it off, when we do turn it off, we'll make one final notification to you as well. So a lot of notifications and a lot of opportunity. But it may seem redundant and it may seem like it's a lot, but it's also because it's a dynamic situation and things change. Weather, is evolving by the second, and so as good as our team is, sometimes the time may be different, or it may not even happen. That's our goal. Then throughout the duration, we operate those community resource centers if there's one that's established. And then when we get the all clear and the weather is lightened up, the wind has died down, we start patrolling. We get the okay to re-energize. We'll let you know. We're going to start patrolling. Unfortunately, we can't turn the power back on immediately like that. It doesn't, be nice if it was that simple. We have to send our crews out, and we have, obviously, you guys here today, and they have to do the arduous work of patrolling the lines, making sure everything's clear, and if there's any damage, Not just removing those big trees off or anything that went into the line, but repairing the line and making it, and fixing it. So we do step restoration. So they'll go through a section, they'll repair and restore, and then they turn it back on, and they'll continue on all the way. So the power won't come back to everybody at the same time or immediately. It'll take a little bit of time. But we want to make sure we communicate with you, so we will keep you updated at a cadence that we have set. And then at the end of a PSPS, we'll call you and let you know the power's back on. And you're like, why are you calling me to let me know the power's back on? Well, we do it for kind of two reasons. One is if you had the ability to leave home and you're not at home, so you know it's safe to come back home. And number two is if your power's still out, then we have to troubleshoot it. So we ask you to call us and let us know so we can send somebody out and troubleshoot your situation. So a lot of notifications for PSPS, and again, we try not to use it. It's one of the tools that we have in the toolbox, but it's something that we reserve for very extreme conditions. So now you know why it's so important for us to have updated contact information. I want to talk a little bit about specific customers that may need additional assistance or may have requirements or that rely on electricity. So when I talk about contacting you, we do it by phone, email, and text. For our medical baseline customers that we know that we have our customer service personally call them and have a conversation with them to know that they understand the impact and they have the resources. If they don't have the resources, then our customer service works with them to make sure that they're able to withstand the event. So we really encourage our medical customers to let us know. We don't have a database or access to any sort of database to let people know unless they tell us. So they have to register in the program. It's called the Medical Certificate Program. There's a QR code here, and then there's also brochures on the side here. If you like paper or if you're super fancy with your apps, I struggle with apps, so I wouldn't use the QR code myself. But we encourage you, if you yourself or if you know others that are vulnerable and require electricity for medical assistive devices, we encourage you to have them register. This way we can get a hold of them, we can make that personal contact and assist them if need be during these types of outages. I also want to talk about, for those that do require, we do have a backup power rebate. So that can be in the form of a hardwired generator, that could be a portable generator, a battery. We offer a rebate of up to $4,000 for our customers in the program. And this allows them to be able to purchase something that they need specifically for their needs, and that varies greatly by individual and family size. $4,000 is a good amount. We do have a wide variety of qualifying generators and batteries that are available. The rebate application's here, and then we also have a handout as well on this side. So I encourage you, if you know anybody that may benefit from that, or even if it's somebody that provides care for those that are vulnerable, for seniors and people with disabilities, they qualify for the rebate too, and they can apply for the rebate as well. So it's a great resource, and we want to encourage you to take advantage of that. And talk to your friends, your family, your neighbors, anybody that you know that may benefit. So now we're going to talk a couple of other things about what you can do. How many people in this room have an emergency plan? No, that's about right. That's about right. Don't thank you guys for those that do have it. It's one of those things you don't think about, but it's something that I encourage you to look at doing as soon as you have a few minutes of time. You don't have to do it all at once. It's free. There's templates online, or you could just write this down, but consider things like if you had to evacuate or if you couldn't get home, where are you going to meet with your loved ones? If you don't have your cell phone, even on today, if I lose my cell phone, and I don't remember any of the phone numbers on my cell phone. Do you? Do you have them written down somewhere that you can get them in case you lose your phone even? It doesn't even have to be a disaster, right? Any of your insurance information, your prescriptions, your medical information, I mean, those types of things, it may seem like, oh, I'll remember that, but you really don't. And during a time of disaster, have that written down somewhere secure is so critical, and it's really peace of mind during daytime and blue sky days. And it just takes time, to put it all together. The other thing that I want to talk about is having an emergency kit. Do people here have a kit, an emergency kit? Okay, much better, awesome. Yeah, this one is a little bit more daunting because you have to buy a lot of things to go in it. Whether you have a kit at home, we recommend 2 to 3 weeks. As always, we're in a Cascadia subduction zone, tsunami zone. All of you know very much about that. If any of you knew Jenny Damaris, who was the former Lincoln County Emergency Manager, you knew that was her pillar that she was on. First aid kits, food for non-perishable, shelf-stable food that you like to eat, not, food with dietary considerations, right? Not canned food that you don't like at all, but that's what's available, because, when you're stressed out and it's a tough time, make sure that you're feeding and nourishing yourself. Pets, what do you need for them, especially kids? Do you have comfort items for them when they're stressed out or worried or, in a tough situation? Anything to help them, make them feel comfortable. Any of your family members or friends that may have assistive device needs, or again, that have needs for electricity or types of medical equipment to help sustain them. Those are the considerations for your emergency kit. It takes a lot longer to do, but I encourage everybody to really consider some time in putting that together. One of the other things is creating a defensible space. Does anybody here practice this concept? Awesome, great. Yeah, this is if you have land around your home, if you're fortunate to have land around your home. It's basically divvied out into zones closest to your home, from closest to furthest out, and how you maintain that vegetation. Because that literally can help protect your home during a fire, based on how you maintain that vegetation. It takes a lot more effort. And again, we highly encourage that for everybody that has the land. We have brochures there called Small Space Bulge Tree for vegetation to have around utility lines. We also have how we maintain vegetation on the brochure back there as well. Another thing, even if you don't have any kind of land, you can also look around your neighborhood, and if you see hazard conditions like this, please report them before it becomes a bad windy day and that tree takes out the power line. You can do this in advance. Let us know that, you can see often visually if there is something that it could potentially come down a line, and help us mitigate that in advance before it does become a big issue. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up, and we'll open up to Q&A soon, but just a couple of takeaways. First, please make sure you update your contact information. That's how we can get a hold of you and keep you informed of what's going on with the outage. Second, if you know anybody, please encourage them to sign up for our medical certificate program. It's really our ability to be able to access them and know that they have vulnerabilities. There's no other way for us to know unless they let us know. And then finally, if you qualify, or if you know somebody that qualifies for the backup rebate program, we highly encourage you to do it. It's a great way to become resilient and to have ability to have power uninterruptedly during an outage. So thanks for your time.